So to test the microphones, I think that will be a good idea to maybe just make a round of introductions yourself, like who you are, what is your name, or what you do for living and professional and stuff. I know that everybody knows those guys, but I think that for testing the microphones will be okay. So go ahead.
You wanted us to introduce ourselves.
A little bit.
Okay, I'm Ben. I'm from Magento.
I have my own microphone. So I'm Łukasz. I work for Strix, and after hours I'm doing training as my own brand, M2 Coach.
And my name is Jisse Reitsma. I'm independent as an organizer of events and as a developer and as a trainer.
My name is Kuba, maybe you know me. For last 2 days I was organizer of this conference, and now I'm kind of switching to Magento Association board member style.
Woo! Someone is getting naked.
Oh, that's sexy.
I expected 4 people to be on the stage, so 5th person up here.
Okay, so first of all, thank you for having you here, all of you. It's a pleasure for me to be moderating this panel. Sorry about my English, and if you don't understand any of my questions, but I think it's what is the role of community in an enterprise world like we live in today?
I do not want to be the first person to answer this.
Okay, I can be the first one because actually, like, I was thinking about this question, and the role is difficult because this is much more commercial environment that it used to be like 10 years ago. But I think it's even more important because it's still open source technology and open source business model. Like most of the companies that we know that we work for a long time together, we built our approach to business on open source and sharing technology. And right now, keeping this community and network healthy, is extremely important because in enterprise, it's easy to forget about how sharing knowledge without expecting like immediate ROI is important. So it's like the role of the community right now is just to keep it stronger and don't forget about these basics.
Okay, so I can continue. I've become maintainer this year after 2 years of really strong passion to one of the side projects of Magento. And for me, it's the role of community in such an enterprise program, enterprise solution, is to show the points that are really necessary to consider with developing such platform. You still have to keep in mind that after all decisions, it affects people's lives. As developers, you have to consider, you have to be aware of this huge ecosystem which is Adobe, and Adobe has to be aware that after all decisions, the developers will be affected. So my point is that the role of community is really strong. They're really huge to point out how the decisions affect people.
What are you meaning by people?
By people, I mean, for me as a developer, it's important to have healthy relationship between business and developers. That's something that we missed several years ago. Now it works really fine, really nice.
Yeah, so I think it's also important to single out the difference between an ecosystem and a community. So the ecosystem is simply Magento, and that's including hosting providers, merchants, system integrators, developers, Magento and Adobe itself. But what makes a community different, right? So that's I think more the question. And I think that what Łukasz says, as soon as it's about people, instead of just about the business interest that you have, then actually an ecosystem could turn into a community. People that know each other, people that help each other, people that try to make Magento a stronger thing.
So I can join to you that it's very specific, and I feel like Adobe really is impressed by that, how community works, how much people are into developing, into how they commit into the system. That's something very unique all across the world, all across the open source world.
I mean, I have some thoughts.
Some things too about that.
So I actually agree with much of what has been said, which is I think is no surprise. Maybe many of you had similar thoughts. In effect, so as a general question, when an enterprise finds itself in possession of a community, so this acquisition, which a large percentage of the value, that $1.8 billion, I mean, it has been made very clear, a large part of that valuation was this ecosystem. I mean, yes, there is a multiple on revenue, but there was leverage in the deal, right? And the leverage for us was the community. So as it relates to the Adobe world, the community is what keeps Adobe honest. Not to imply that Adobe would be dishonest about this, but just this is this is a new thing in this space. I mean, Adobe has actually some fantastic communities around the Creative Cloud world, but this is a different side of the business for now. And if Adobe wants to enjoy the benefits and support this thing that they've gotten themselves into with Magento, they have to listen, they have to show direct support, and they have to make sure that we have a clear map of where things are going. And I think as a community, and speaking more broadly as an ecosystem, which by the way, I had a almost day-long meeting with leadership trying to figure out the difference between ecosystem and community. I don't think we ever came to a consensus. But as everyone in this room, I would say, is effectively part of this community, whether you realize it or not, it is, if you're in business in this space, then we need all the help that we can get to make sure that we continue things down the path that we want them to go on. And then I would also add that in the case of Magento community and Adobe, ultimately, I expect that the community will have a tremendous amount of leverage and control over the Magento brand as the years go on. And I suspect that will be the case. But I'm not a businessman, so don't make any plans.
I have some comments about that as well, because of our being SI for almost 10 years ago, like many of the companies that are here as well. I think that there is something inside a contribution that it's much more organized than before. Okay, I remember in Magento Spain, where we were at the first edition, we were together about naming the people that were contributing to the code. We'll give them some kind of meritocracy, or just even name on the release notes. Like I remember the Red extension by Colin was one of the first. But even in the namespace of the extension was the name on it, so everybody was aware that that guy was doing something that was already, put it in the code base of Magento. So we were talking about that. We were mentioning contributor things. It was 2013, so long time ago. And now that this new movement about changing the hackathons that were at that time with the contribution days, and the points and all the meritocracy thing that are giving you just even awards. So we were in the main stage. We didn't expect that being on the stage. We were with swords. Remember that? So was Mark Labelle giving us the prize about being top #1 contributor to a company, and we were with shirts and t-shirts, and everybody was, with a suit like I am today, because we didn't expect to have this. No one told us about that. So I think that in the long shot, me, in my point of view, being a business owner as well, Magento were giving us too much. And I think it's always the time to give something back to Magento. And also giving something back to Magento, in this case, was giving us also some visibility that, of course, it's driven business to us. So I think that we don't need to be, in my humble opinion, naive in terms of, okay, let's contribute to make a better world, of course. But contributing, you're putting something that comes from you, that you learn, that you really do know about, and I think that gives you some position in advance than the rest. And this is more or less my thoughts about that.
Yeah, so the point that you're making is also related to the point of that we're talking about Magento open source. But what is open source? So open source means actually that the source is available to us, to the rest of the community and the ecosystem for free.
Yeah,
and we're never asking something back, or we're never returning that much back.
I don't know. I mean, we only make contributions in our company, the policy, to the open source part. That we do know that is used as well in the Magento Commerce part, of course, right? But our policy is this, right? I know that it's always, points, even though if you contribute for the enterprise part of Magento Commerce instead of open source, but still, this is your company policy or your own policy or your own criteria to go forward with it.
One of the most fascinating things for me about this discussion is that when we're talking about enterprise and community, there's been a lot of equating that with contribution. That's an interesting takeaway for me. I don't think anyone up here is necessarily saying that's the whole story, but that's been a bulk of the conversation, and that is, it's important to recognize, but it's also, contribution. I view contribution, and I try. Sherry and I do a lot of work internally to make sure that people, especially inside the company, are viewing contribution as, you're here. There's an opportunity cost to being here. You are online having conversations. You are writing blog articles. You're reading blog articles. You're commenting on documentation. Whatever it is, these are all forms of contribution. I mean, it's open source is a participation sport, and I guess the enterprise might be the one setting the rules or making the playing field. I don't know.
Yeah, but then the question is also like, what does this enterprise actually mean? So we might have an impression that this enterprise movement is just taking away Magento from us, or that it's trying to take over like features that are introduced in the Magento system, while that's not maybe the case. So I think we often have, like, as an ecosystem, we have an evil impression of what enterprise actually means. But in essence, what you already say is that the current Magento system is already oriented on an enterprise level. However, it's still full of contributions as well.
Yeah. I mean, I think Magento as a brand is more possessed. That brand identity, that brand value, is more possessed and defined by all of you, all of us. And the enterprise is beholden to that, as long as the enterprise needs that brand.
So, for me, this, according to that discussion about the commerce, about the open source, I would say that maybe open source, maybe community is a good leverage to really push the values of community of open source into that commerce world. For me, the example from quite recent time, when Magento focuses on Adobe stock integration, the community on community engineering Slack created another project to rewrite the cron completely from the scratch. So that's the leverage to show what is important to community. Because for enterprise, it's important to sell the stock integration photos. For community, to have reliable tools to work with. So that's my point of view.
So what kind of mechanism would we have as a community to actually make sure that both the interests of the enterprise and the interests of the merchants and system integrators actually all get what they want?
Pulling the rope.
I think it's moving a little bit responsibility from single person to the whole team and company. Like years ago when we started, it was mostly community of individuals, freelancers, small companies, also bigger companies. But right now in enterprise, it's a big responsibility to move this attitude, to move this approach level to the whole company strategy. Because we also grown, we are bigger, we work with bigger clients, and it's not the same. We don't always share our own work. It's more like we are thinking how to share the company work to the whole ecosystem. So it's slightly different. I just think that this is the evolution of the community right now. That it's not the same, because it's not just about single developer, single store owner. It's more about the whole business. If the business understands the idea of sharing and contributing, and I think this is extremely important role, how to convince big businesses that because they started using open source, they should also understand the whole idea behind open source. The idea of sharing and contributing some work of the company, not only my personal work, but just the group work.
You think in this case that, for example, the Magento, let's say, ecosystem right now, including the community, has been growing and being more mature since the beginning, that we were, we were building companies something like 10 years ago, that we were involved in this technology. We were like learning it, like learning about our own mistakes, trying to reach bigger and bigger clients, but also the merchants, they are more related with the daily basic stacks that they were not taking care in the past, because this business is evolving every day. So right now they require more professional services. That this is what we call enterprise-ish thing that we are missing.
Yeah, I think it's it's somehow like that. That is like, it's not, maybe it's not enterprise. We call it enterprise, but it's actually more professional. It's
because there is a difference between enterprise, the license, and the type of services that we need to provide to the merchants. This is the thing that I want to ask.
Right now, I'm not referring to the license at all. I think it's not the case, because with Magento 2 and in general approach to Magento right now, it's just more professional, more enterprise level than it used to be before. And it's even like harder to make sure that all companies involved, they really understand that using this type of software is a lot about taking. That's something that is already there and we can use it. But it's also about like a planning how to give back, how to contribute on a different levels, like with everything, like what was mentioned before, like contributing with the code, but also with documentation, know-how, or even ideas how to guide this product. Because that's true that sometimes ideas that comes from really big enterprise, like a real enterprise, are not really what average like a Magento user right now needs, from the developer perspective or from merchant perspective. So
I have a question. Like, where do you place right now merchants in this ecosystem? Do you think that we listen to them enough in order to place them inside a community as they are? Like I don't know, Ben.
So I know we want to. Magento Association hat, right? I'll put that one on. That was one of the. It's very handsome. That was part of the very long formative, the origin story. I got it. One of the origin story of the association was one of the things that came out early on was like when we're looking at Meet Magento and how the community has been represented by community stuff in the past, we're saying, you know what, the merchant voice has been pretty absent. Like, we like to relate to each other as agencies, as developers, technology vendors, but we you know, sort of the merchant role in all of this is like, well, we want the merchants here because that'll make the sponsors happy, and then they'll pay for all of us to have a great after party. But really, at the end of the day, I mean, you know, I know my background in the agency world, at the end of the day, like, you have to make the right decision for the merchant. And that includes evaluating even the shop system that you use, let alone how you use it. So I know it has always been important that we get this right, as sort of individually. But if we want to carry things further, get further down this maturing sense of business that we are all evolving, being forced to evolve, then we need to more strategically engage those merchant voices. It's part of the reason that we have merchant representatives on the Magento Association board.
Yeah, but for example, it's also it shows that we need it because we don't have representative here on the panel.
Good
because
point.
It's actually really difficult to get merchant voice. Like I would love to see if we have any merchants left right now in the room.
Nope.
Yeah, maybe somewhere there. And it's like that's a big problem because like we feel that we want to share, we want to contribute, but it's not that obvious for other businesses. It's not obvious for merchants that they can really engage and gain a lot of value from that, from sharing the knowledge and don't reinvent the wheel every time. So I think it's important role of community to educate, like a community, to educate agencies and developers in the community, to educate clients, merchants, that the open source and the community around Magento has value. It's not just like meeting of friends to, you know, have a beer, play games, and, you know, have fun. Okay, it's a lot about that, but it's a lot about exchanging really valuable knowledge. And this is a big challenge for the community right now, because it was easier before when we had a merchant who was in the same time a store manager, a project manager, and, you know, like a one-man army running the store. Right now, when we are working with bigger clients, not even huge, but bigger clients, it's more about convincing them that they also have to adjust the business model to use the power of community. But it means also that they need to contribute. And that's actually a big challenge. We can see it in different Meet Magentos around the world. That, okay, merchants are coming to listen about, okay, what's new, can we find like a new partner? But there are really only few who are interested in really proactive cooperation with the community, and that's actually a question I don't know how to answer.
Yeah.
If it's something that we should like try to change, educate people, or maybe this kind of business, it just has to work like this.
So I personally see this challenge as well. So I started organizing Magento user groups already like way back 8 years ago in the Netherlands. And I found it fun actually to organize user groups for developers, because somehow developers get this idea of open source, that you put something in and you get something back. And then I tried to do the same thing with merchants, and then merchants were often just looking to gather knowledge, but not knowing for sure like how they could contribute back to the ecosystem itself. And we all know that merchants are like the vital thing in this ecosystem. That's the stupid thing, that we know that without merchants, we don't have a job, we don't make money.
That's right.
So I feel that, first of all, it's important. But second of all, I think also that it's right now crucial. crucial because the Magento, well, Adobe is moving up enterprise. So it's focusing on a different level of merchants than we're used to under Magento 1. So we still have the Magento 1 to 2 migration. We still have a lot of legacy out there. PWA is coming up. So a merchant needs to make a lot of difficult choices right now. And I think that it's the opportunity, but also like the necessity of the community to actually show merchants what is the best way forward, but also show the merchants basically that the community is fun, that there's like a lot of things to give and take, and give mostly Mason.
Maybe we should also redefine who is a merchant, because like when we think about merchants, we think, okay, there are agencies, there are developers, there are merchants. But who is merchant? Is merchant a store owner? Or rather, we should stop thinking about pure business store owners being a merchants, joining the community, because it's a little bit too far from I don't know, business, marketing. Maybe we should just redefine merchant to be a project manager, product owner, or technology like a developers in merchant, like a merchant support. I don't know. I'm just that's a question I'm asking to myself. Yeah. Who is a merchant right now in the community?
Okay, so from my perspective, Jisse mentioned something very important because Adobe is moving towards bigger and bigger players, and players like this have different rules of let's say cooperation. You mentioned that we have to redefine the merchants. And can we consider merchant as a store owner? In my opinion, yes. But Adobe is slowly dropping them sideways because they are focusing on bigger and bigger players. But the most valuable feedback about the further development of the platform, the easiest way you can get from the smallest players, because the way to reach them is quite short. There is agency and the client, or there is agency, project manager, client. The client, I mean merchant. With corporate structures, you have to get through all that structure, so you don't have the feedback. It's lost on a way of management. So in my personal opinion, we can define the merchant as a store owner, but it wouldn't reflect the real structures of our merchants.
So it's interesting if right now it should define the direction of community efforts to make Magento easier, faster, simpler to install and to work for smaller merchants, or does it mean that we should more think about executive tracks for listening to top executives for big merchants? Because there are two different approaches, and actually Magento is theoretically so flexible that it's covering both groups. But
so why not focus on both?
Exactly. That's why Magento is so great. But I think this is exactly what I was talking in my presentation. I think that Jisse was here, that we're missing the merchants, but we're missing have two-way communications with them, because we make speeches for them. We talk about the success case that are so good. Everything looks so good on a stage. Merchants talking about using some technology of a sponsor or something like that. But I think that it's our responsibility to enable a communication channel between merchants and the ecosystem, and include them all together at the same level. What do you think?
Yeah, I think we're missing that. The question is how to do it the right way.
Well, so I think Magento started as this perfect solution to build an e-commerce site. And then we all focused really heavily on the solution. We focused heavily on Magento doing basically all of the tasks that we needed in a web shop. And since then, as Magento enthusiasts, we've been saying like Magento, 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 Magento. But slowly we come to the realization with Magento being Adobe and different microservices also being in there, that it's no longer just about Magento as an e-commerce system, but it's actually about what kind of solution can you build. And that's actually what Ignacio's talk was also about. It's not the question how Magento should fit in there. No, it's the question like, we are already like Magento specialists, but how can we help the business grow of the merchant involved? And that's by turning it around. It's the wrong question that we're asking, like how does the Magento enterprise fit into the community or whatever? No, it's the merchants.
I mean, I think this is, especially if you've been around this business. I mean, if you're in this business, hopefully, if nothing else, we are proxies for the merchants in our lives. We've been proxies, but our business has changed quite a lot over 10 years, and that actually is true also for merchants. If we can imagine merchants coming to the Meet Merchants conference, if there were such a silly thing, that those merchants, the things that they would be talking about over time would change. And as our businesses have sort of changed in the specific ways, the solutions that we build are more complex, but they're doing more. But also the merchants in general are more sophisticated. I just wanted to make sure that was teased out, that we are still proxies for them, but the way in which basically the people for whom we're proxies, they're a much different breed than they were 5-10 years ago.
Yeah. Remember this initiative from Meet Magento Netherlands with the mage doctors, that just the merchants weren't going there to talk to them about their problems with the stores. I mean, not necessarily needs to be like this. Like, you go to the doctor where something wrong is happening, but I think that we should enable something like, not a doctor, like a advisor desk or something like that, to listen to them, to write down some features that they need, or some, insights about how is their relationship with their agencies, also with Adobe, also with Magento, with the technology providers and stuff. I don't know, maybe it would be a good idea to do in our events, Kuba.
So, if I can join. In my opinion, you mentioned something very important, because sometimes merchant is hopeless when it comes to the issues with agency. Agency should be the proxy between merchant and Magento, but if agency is really not doing the job right, merchant is left alone very often. So the idea of advisor, of someone that if you buy the license, you have your own advisor who will help you with all the issues, even if you don't need him, but you always have this phone number you can call any time of day or night, it would get the easier way to gather feedback from merchants.
Not in my case.
Well, I mean, theoretically, so a Magento Commerce customer, Enterprise One customer, should have that direct relationship with Magento where they can say there's a problem, but that leaves a massive swath, and I won't say that even that chain of escalation goes smoothly. I mean, no one ever sort of reaches out in that regard because they're happy. But that leaves a huge swath and a big chunk, maybe the major chunk of this whole economy, the entire economy around Magento, in a bit of a blind spot, right? Because once again, we're teasing out this something that we recognize, which is this lack of a sophisticated communication mechanism, ultimately between vendor and customer. Interesting.
Okay, so I think that we need to wrap up. Any last comment you want to mention quickly?
How many people are looking forward to Meet Magento Poland 2020? Yes, all hands go up, please.
Yes.
And I think it would be a great idea if somebody would organize a merchant-only event where system integrators might be involved, but then completely independent, not trying to make money off the merchants, but really focus upon the needs.
Speech.
Yeah, sorry. But I thought you were going to organize it.
So to sum up, I wanted to just sum up that the role of community and the whole environment is huge even in such enterprise solution that is not only Magento, but Adobe, Adobe Commerce, the whole package. So we have to be aware to listen to that voice, because it shows us the right direction to go, and we have to carry on with that feedback, because it's really valuable.
And then I want to hear a final word on the Magento Association.
The final word is that it's amazing that we have so many events, Meet Magento events around the world, because in our world of global commerce, it's a unique value. And I think it's important to promote all those events to our partners, clients, to make sure that they truly understand the value of cooperation or co-petition, this cooperation and competition combination, because this is like a really budget way to get huge value. So that's a huge power of community, and we can discuss how to make it better. But it's great now, and I think we just have to keep doing this, and at the same time discuss how to, with small steps, make sure that it's not decreasing, that it's going forward.
So please give them an applause. Thank you very much for attending this panel.